You don't struggle to change because you're weak. You struggle because something else is already leading you. That's what most people never realize. You think you're making decisions in the moment. You think you just lost control for a second. But if you slow down and look honestly, you'll start to see it wasn't sudden at all. The reaction was already there. The words were already forming. Something in you was already moving before you had time to stop it. And afterward, when everything is quiet, you tell yourself you'll do better next time. But when the moment comes again, it plays out almost the same way. Not because you don't care, not because you don't believe, but because what's leading you hasn't changed. Scripture says in Galatians 5:16, "Walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh." But that's where many misunderstand. This isn't just about trying harder or resisting more. It's about recognizing that you are always being led by something, your emotions, your fears, your past, or the Spirit of God. And once you begin to see that, something shifts. Because the real issue is no longer just what you do, it's what has been quietly guiding you all along. So before trying to change everything at once, it might be time to look at something deeper. Those patterns you've lived with for so long, they've started to feel like part of who you are. Part 1. Most of your life is running on autopilot. Most of your life is not being chosen in the moment, it's being continued. You think you're deciding how to respond. But if you're honest, many times you're just repeating something that was already moving inside you. You see it in the small moments. Someone says something simple, but it touches your pride, and your tone shifts before you even realize it. You respond a little sharper than you meant to. And later, when you think about it, it doesn't feel new. It feels familiar, like something you've done before. Or when things start to slip out of control, your mind begins to race. You try to hold everything together, to manage every outcome, and even when nothing has happened yet, you're already tired inside. Or sometimes, it's the opposite. You stay quiet. Not because you have nothing to say, but because something in you would rather withdraw than risk being misunderstood. And afterward you tell yourself it didn't matter, but deep down you know it did. Different situations, same pattern. It happens so quickly that you don't even call it a choice. You call it who you are. But over time, if you're willing to look a little deeper, you begin to see something unsettling. You don't just lose control in the moment, you follow what already had control. Paul the Apostle spoke about this in a way that still feels uncomfortably real. What I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do. That's not confusion, that's conflict. Not between what you know and don't know, but between what is leading you and what you truly desire. And this is where many people stop too soon. They try to fix the reaction, they try to change the outcome, but they never stop to ask what was already shaping that moment before it even began. Because if you don't recognize what is leading your reactions, you will keep calling it your personality, when in reality, something else has been quietly guiding you all along. And this is where walking in the Spirit begins, not when everything feels clear and under control, but right here, in the places where you realize that not everything inside you is meant to lead you. Part 2, two ways of living, two very different direction. If you've been honest with yourself up to this point, then you've already seen something. You've seen that there are moments when you don't respond the way you truly want to, and maybe you've asked yourself, why does this keep happening? Now let me ask you something, and don't answer too quickly. When that moment comes, the one you wish you could take back, does it feel like you're choosing, or does it feel like something in you is already moving? Most people don't think about that. They just assume, I made a bad choice. And in a sense that's true, but if you stay with it a little longer, you begin to see it's not just about the choice. It's about what is leading you into that choice. And there are really only two directions a life can take. And one of them you already know very well. It's the life that follows whatever rises inside. When something touches your pride, you answer back. When you feel pressure, you try to control things. When you feel uncertain, your mind starts running ahead of you. You've lived there long enough, you don't need anyone to explain it to you. But here's what I want you to notice. Even when you manage to do the right thing on the outside, is there still something unsettled on the inside? That quiet tension, that pressure, that need to hold things together. That's often how you know what's leading you. Now there is another way, and it doesn't come the way you expect. It doesn't push you. It doesn't rush you. In fact, it often feels so small that you could ignore it without even realizing it. Have you ever felt that? That brief moment, right before you respond, where something in you pauses. You could say the same words you always say. You could react the same way you always do. But there's something there, quiet, almost easy to miss, telling you there's another way to respond. Most people move past that moment. Not because they want to do wrong, but because the other voice feels stronger, more familiar, more like them. But over time, you begin to see the difference. Jesus Christ spoke about a tree and its fruit, and maybe you've heard that before, but let me put it this way. A tree doesn't decide what kind of fruit to produce in the moment. It reveals what is already feeding it. And your life works the same way. So walking in the Spirit is not just about trying to produce better fruit. It's about learning to recognize which voice you're actually following in that moment. And that takes time. You may not see it clearly at first. You may only realize it afterward, when everything is already done. But if you keep paying attention, you'll start to notice it sooner. And here's something I've learned over the years. Not everything that feels natural is meant to lead you. Some things feel natural because you followed them for a long time. But the Spirit of God often comes quietly. So the question is not just, what should I do here? The deeper question is, what is leading me right now? And the way you begin to answer that slowly, honestly, moment by moment, that's where a different kind of life begins to take shape. Part 3. The moment most people miss. If you miss this, you will miss more than you think. Because most of your life doesn't turn in big decisions. It turns in moments so small, you barely notice them. You're in a conversation. Someone says something, and you feel it immediately. You already know what you're about to say. In fact, if you're honest, you've said it before. And then just for a second, there's a pause. It's very small, easy to miss, but it's there. You could respond the way you always do. You could follow the same pattern, the same tone, the same reaction, or you could stop. Have you ever noticed that moment? Not after everything is over, but right there before it happens. Most people don't. They move past it too quickly. The reaction feels stronger, more natural, more like who they are, and so they follow it, almost without thinking. And later, they look back and wonder why nothing is changing. But the truth is, that moment was where everything could have been different. Walking in the Spirit doesn't begin in the big things. It begins in that pause, in the space between what you feel and what you choose to follow. And here is something you may not have realized before. Most people don't drift away from the life they want in one big decision. They drift in moments like this. Small, quiet, almost invisible. Moments where something else takes the lead, and they don't even see it happen. So the question is not just what you will do next. It's whether you will learn to recognize that moment when something in you is about to lead, and whether you will follow it or let it pass. Part 4. What walking in the Spirit actually looks like. Up to this point, you may be thinking, so what does this actually look like? Because it's one thing to notice your patterns. It's another thing entirely to live differently. And this is where many people get confused. They imagine walking in the Spirit as something dramatic, something obvious, something you would feel strongly every time it happens. But over the years, you begin to see it's not like that. Walking in the Spirit is often so ordinary. You can be living it and not even realize it. It looks like this. Because you're in a conversation, and something in you wants to respond the way you always have. The tone is ready. The words are there. But this time, you don't follow it. Not because you forced yourself. Not because you were trying to be better. It just doesn't come out the same. Or you feel that familiar wave of anxiety rising. The urge to control everything, to figure it all out immediately. And for a moment you almost go with it. But then, something in you settles. You don't have all the answers. Nothing has really changed on the outside. But inside, you're not being pulled the same way. That's easy to overlook, because it doesn't feel powerful. It doesn't feel dramatic. But that is what it looks like. Galatians 5 speaks about the fruit of the Spirit: love, peace, patience, self-control. But those are not things you turn on in a moment. They show up when something else is no longer leading you. And that's the difference. Walking in the Spirit is not about adding something new to your life. It's about no longer being driven by what used to control you. That's why it can feel so quiet. Because instead of reacting, you pause. Instead of being pulled, you remain. Instead of proving something, you let it go. And if you're not paying attention, you might miss it. You might think nothing is happening. But over time, you begin to notice the same situations don't move you the same way anymore. The same triggers don't carry the same weight. The same patterns start to loosen their hold. Not all at once, not perfectly, but differently. And if you're honest, you know you didn't create that change on your own. That's why this matters. Because walking in the Spirit is not something you achieve. It's something you begin to recognize and learn to stay with. Right there, in those ordinary moments where something in you is no longer reacting the way it used to. That's not weakness. That's not passivity. That's the beginning of a life that is no longer being driven, but quietly being led by the Spirit of God. Part 5. Why you still struggle, even when you're trying. By this point, you may be wondering, if something is really changing, then why does it still feel like this? Why do the same reactions still show up, even when you've started to see them more clearly? That question matters more than you think. Because this is the place where many people quietly give up. Not all at once, but slowly. They begin to feel like they're not really changing, like they're just going in circles. But let me ask you something. Is it possible that the struggle you feel now is actually a sign that something has already begun to change? Because before, many of these things happened without you even noticing. You reacted, you moved, you spoke, and it all felt natural. There was no pause, no awareness, no tension. Now there is. Now you feel it when something inside you starts to pull. You notice the reaction forming. You sense the direction before you fully follow it. And sometimes you still follow it anyway. And that's the part that discourages you. But what if that's not failure in the way you think it is? What if it means you're no longer moving blindly? There is a difference between being led and being dragged. And for a long time, many people live being dragged by what they feel, by what they fear, by what has shaped them over the years. They don't question it, because it feels like who they are. But when you begin to walk in the Spirit, something shifts. Not everything changes at once, but something in you is no longer fully in agreement with those old patterns. That's why you feel the tension. Not because nothing is happening, but because something in you is no longer willing to follow the same direction without question, without question, without question. What for? And yes, there will still be moments when you fall back into it. You say what you wish you hadn't said. You react in ways that don't reflect who you're becoming. That doesn't disappear overnight. But over time, if you're paying attention, you'll begin to notice something else. It's not just how often you fail. It's what you return to afterward. Do you go back to the same way of thinking? Or do you begin to turn, even if slowly, towards something different? Because walking in the Spirit is not measured by perfection. It's seen in direction, in what you are learning to follow again and again, even when you don't get it right the first time. And if you stay with that long enough, you begin to understand the struggle is not the end of the story. It's often the place where you learn what is still trying to lead you and what you no longer want to follow. Part 6. Learning to follow, not just feel. Now this is where it has to become practical, because if we leave it only at the level of ideas, most people will nod their head, feel moved for a few minutes, and then go right back into the same patterns tomorrow morning. So let's bring this down into daily life. If you want to walk in the Spirit, you have to learn how to catch the moment earlier, not after the reaction, not only when the damage is done, earlier. That is one of the first changes. You begin to notice things sooner. And the first simple practice is this. When something rises in you strongly, do not move as quickly as it tells you to move. That alone will save you from many things. When irritation rises, slow your mouth down. When fear rises, slow your thoughts down. When the need to defend yourself rises, slow your response down. You do not have to answer everything the moment it appears. Not every feeling deserves immediate agreement. That may sound small, but it is not small at all. For many people, that is the first place walking in the Spirit becomes visible. A second thing, name what is happening inside you, honestly before God. Not with polished spiritual language, just honestly. Lord, this is pride. Lord, this is fear. Lord, I want to control this. Lord, I want to say something that will hurt. Bringing a thing into the light weakens its power. What stays unnamed often stays in control. Scripture says, walk in the Spirit, and that kind of walking requires honesty. You cannot follow the Spirit while pretending something else is not there. Third, learn to ask one question in the middle of ordinary moments. What is leading me right now? That question is simple, but it can uncover a great deal. Before sending the message, before answering in that conversation, before sitting too long in a spiral of anxious thoughts, stop and ask it, is this peace leading me? Is this love leading me? Is this the Spirit of God leading me? Or am I being led by wounded pride, fear, resentment, or the need to control? You do not need a dramatic experience to answer that. Many times the answer is already plain if you are willing to be truthful. Fourth, give yourself one small act of obedience instead of waiting for a big spiritual feeling. This is where many people get stuck. They wait until they feel calm enough, clear enough, spiritual enough. But walking in the Spirit often begins with one quiet act of obedience before the feelings have settled. It may be choosing not to send the second message. It may be lowering your voice. It may be saying, I need a minute before I answer that. It may be admitting I was wrong. It may be choosing to pray before you keep thinking. Small obediences matter because a life in the Spirit is built that way, step by step, not leap by leap. Fifth, make room for Scripture before the pressure of the day starts shaping you. This does not have to mean long hours, but it does mean you should not let your emotions become the first voice you follow every morning. Even a few quiet minutes with the Word can reorder the inside of a person. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. A lamp is not given to impress you, it is given to guide your next step. And let me add one more thing, because this matters. When you fail, return quickly. Do not spend the rest of the day sinking into shame. Do not say, well, I've already ruined it. That is another trap. If you spoke wrongly, stop and confess it. If you followed fear, admit it. If you need to apologize, do it. Walking in the Spirit is not only seen in avoiding wrong steps, it is also seen in how quickly you return when you have taken one. So if you want something clear to carry into daily life, carry these few things. Slow down your first reaction. Name honestly what is happening inside you. Ask what is leading you. Choose one small act of obedience and return quickly when you fail. It is not complicated, but it is not easy either. It takes watchfulness. It takes humility, it takes practice, but this is how a different life is formed. Not by trying to become impressive, and not by waiting for unusual moments, but by learning, in very ordinary situations, how to stop following everything you feel and start following the Spirit of God. Part 7. A life that is being led. If you've stayed with this long enough, then you may already see it. Not everything in your life needs to be fixed at once. Not every pattern disappears overnight. But something begins to change when you start to notice what is leading you. You begin to see those moments more clearly, the reaction that rises, the thought that pulls you, the direction you're about to follow before you fully step into it. And maybe nothing on the outside looks very different at first. You still go through the same days. You still face the same pressures. You're still dealing with the same people, but something inside is no longer moving the same way. You pause more. You react less quickly. You don't feel the same need to prove, to control, to defend everything. And if you're honest, you didn't force that change. It didn't come from trying harder. It came from something quieter, from learning, little by little, not to follow everything you feel, from recognizing that not every voice inside you deserves to lead. And over time, your life begins to take a different shape. Not perfect. Not effortless, but steady. And maybe this is where it becomes real for you. Not in a big decision, not in a moment where everything is clear, but the next time something rises in you, the next time you feel that familiar pull, you may remember this, and instead of moving as quickly as you always have, you might pause, just for a moment. And in that moment, ask yourself, what is leading me right now? Because that question, asked honestly, again and again, is how a life begins to shift. Not all at once, but quietly, and that quiet shift is what it looks like to begin walking in the Spirit. Conclusion: there's something quiet about the way God works. He doesn't rush you, and he doesn't force you. Most of the time, he meets you in places that don't look important at all. The next word you're about to say, the next thought you're about to follow, the next reaction rising in your heart. And maybe that's where this becomes real. Not in trying to fix everything tonight, not in promising that tomorrow will be different, but in something much smaller and much more honest. The next time you feel that pull, the one you already know so well, just pause. Not long, just enough to notice it. Enough to realize you don't have to follow it the way you always have. And in that small space, turn your attention to God. Even if all you can say is, Lord, help me here, that's enough. You may not feel anything dramatic. You may not have a clear answer. But something in you begins to shift when you choose, even quietly, to turn toward him. Because walking in the Spirit was never meant to feel like pressure. It's not about becoming someone impressive. It's about learning, little by little, to stay close to the one who is already near. So don't be discouraged by how slow it feels. Don't measure your life by how often you get it right. Pay attention instead to what you're learning to follow and how often you come back. And may God meet you there in those ordinary moments where no one else sees, where the choices feel small, but the direction matters more than you realize. May he give you a heart that is steady, a spirit that is quiet enough to listen, and a life that step by step learns to walk with him. Not perfectly, but truly.